Mike Brennan, and we brought Paul Eisenstein back again. Talk about all things auto. He works with Headlight dot, what is it? Headlight dot news, right?
Yep, headlight.news. And if you can say there's no .com.
No dot com. Yes. Okay. Cool. Let's talk about some of the hot topics. Now, EVs are still a hot topic. There's a lot of gloom and doom surrounding them right now. Oh my
Yeah.
God, the EVs are dying, but that's not
Yeah.
really the case, right?
No,
So
it not even close. How many market segments in the auto industry, actually almost anywhere, would you expect to see only 10% growth on an annualized basis? The reality is, even in the SUV market, things aren't growing that fast. It's pretty rare. Uh, but when you compare it to what happened with EVs having grown, what, 800% between 2019 and early 2023, that sounds awful, right? But it's still growing. And it means that EVs alone will still top out somewhere north of 1.3 million vehicles this year, or a little bit less than 10% of the US automotive market. You add in hybrids, plug in hybrids, and yeah, a few hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and that means electrified vehicles are going to be 20% of the US new vehicle market this year. That ain't bad coming from essentially nowhere barely 5 years ago.
Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what you were saying earlier about the bill of materials of a Tesla being that much lower than competing vehicles, what is the reason for that? What's
Yeah.
behind that?
Yeah, we talked a little bit off the records, or I should say off recording. So let me give a little bit of background on that. John Murphy, who is the head of research and very well regarded analyst over at Bank of America Research, did his annual Car Wars study here in Detroit for the Automotive Press Association barely a week ago. And he shocked everybody with a number of the things that he talked about. One is that the bill of materials, often referred to as the BOM, and for those who aren't in the business, basically the parts that go into a vehicle, are for Tesla. Are you ready for this? $17,000 less. So imagine Tesla is building a Model Y, and before they actually do anything in the factory, or they also have a huge advantage in labor costs. They already have a $17,000 cost advantage over, say, the very similarly targeted Ford Mustang Mach E. That is huge. It's a type of number that makes it extremely difficult for a company like Ford or GM or Volkswagen or whoever you want to talk about to be competitive.
They stacking up vis-a-vis the Chinese.
They've got similar cost issues. Even Tesla is getting nervous about the Chinese. It has some advantages, some of the things that Tesla is doing, like its so-called gigacastings, where it replaces dozens, even hundreds of stamped metal parts that have to be welded with one or two cast aluminum pieces. The Chinese clearly have an advantage, and one of their key advantages, of course, is labor. They're coming from a very low labor cost country. So that's a real plus for them. But they've also done a lot of other things right. They've done very, very well in terms of centralizing computer technology and so on. So the Chinese are going to pose a similar threat. Some people have called it an existential threat if they come into the US market and take on the Detroit or even some of the other foreign manufacturers when it comes to EVs.
So, why is Tesla's bill of materials so much less? What's causing that? I mean, it's you got to have a battery, you got to have motors, and so on and so forth.
Well, they build a lot of the stuff themselves. They have optimized a lot of their technology. They're using, as I mentioned before, some novel approaches like this gigacasting that eliminates not just material, but a lot of labor costs that goes into those materials. They've changed the way they take on a number of things. So, for example, the folks at Tesla have developed a centralized computing system instead of having, well, say, sensors out in the corners of the vehicle, radar, sonar, camera. and having all sorts of microprocessors at the same, decentralized. They basically have all the computing power in a central location. So that makes it not just cheaper, but it also can make it faster and easier to integrate all these different components. So, there are a number of advantages, and cost is only one of them.
And then there seems to be thunder and lightning going on at Auburn Hills at Stellantis.
Ooh, that's a bad one, isn't it? So when Carlos Tavares, the CEO of Stellantis, the parent company of what used to be Fiat Chrysler, which used to be the parent company of Fiat and Chrysler, when he was in town a couple weeks ago, he started laying out some very serious concerns, saying that he expects to see the production costs for his vehicles, particularly EVs, go down by 30%. This is an industry where it used to be said purchasing agents and engineers would kill to save a nickel. He's wanting to reduce it by 30%, which is many thousands of dollars. And for a bunch of reasons, there'll not just be layoffs coming, at least that's what we're hearing, but that they will be very heavily focused on North America. Now, why North America? Well, one, they're moving a lot of development, engineering and otherwise over to Europe. So really the only thing that you'll continue seeing here in North America, particularly at the Chrysler operations, will be the focus on larger platforms like the Stella Large chassis used for their new Ram 1500 EV, and the Stella that's Stella Frame, and then Stella Large will be in things like the future Wagoneer S and other big products. And there's another reason. The reality is that Stellantis is very beholden to European governments, particularly in Italy and France. They have a lot of money tied up in the company, and they're basically saying, if you're going to cut, you better cut over in the States.
Hmm. Okay, so what could be on the chopping block here? I've heard they talked about selling the headquarters.
There's talk about that. Yeah, will they get rid of the Chrysler Technology Center and Tower in Auburn Hills? Well, if you go there, and I do occasionally, you realize even for the last few years, even before it became Stellantis, there was a sharp reduction in the number of people working out of there. Like the rest of the industry, there's been a huge move to working from home, so that brought it down a lot. And there's a lot of unused space. Now you move a lot of operations out of the U.S. to begin with. You're going to cut employment there even more. And it's not unlike what we've seen in a couple other places. Look, General Motors once upon a time used up a good portion of the Renanissance Center, and now the only thing that's going to remain in Detroit once they move out of the Ren Center will be enough operations to fill just 3 floors in the new Hudson's building and the low-rise Hudson building in downtown. There's talk ongoing for a long time, but it seems to be gaining new traction, that Ford Motor Company might want to get out of Glass House.
Hmm.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they do want to rid themselves. The question is, who would take over?
Yeah. What about Jeep and Toledo? Are they safe?
Well, the manufacturing operations in many cases are safe, particularly Jeep. Uh, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward as Stellantis increases their EV operations and anything else that might be potentially eligible for federal tax credits. Because, of course, we have very strict incentive. They have very strict localized production rules under the Inflation Reduction Act. So that's why a lot of manufacturers are moving EV and plug-in hybrid production here to the States. That said, there are several other countries under the rules that manufacturer could go to. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some Stellantis EVs switch over to Mexico.
Huh.
What's interesting to me is that you've got this push pull of more people working from home, less need for office space. But on the other hand, I also read about a lot of bosses, particularly in engineering, who say, "Look, we work in teams. We've got to be together in a physical location." What is the status of that? Do engineers really need to be in the same room?
It does help. I've as somebody who has worked remotely since I started as a journalist 45 years ago, I get the appeal. On the other hand, there are certain industries that really do need to co-locate, but here's the asterisk, at least occasionally. And
Yeah.
what you're starting to see at GM and some other companies, whether automotive or not, is that the approach is to have limited co-location where you might just come in 2 or 3 days a week, and those may not be the same day as your entire team. Person A might come in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Person B might come in Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that there's one day or 2 days a week where everybody's in the same location, but not all the time.
Hmm. Any final points you want to make before we let you go?
Well, I think what we're pointing out today is that this is an industry under massive transformation. Uh, I wrote a piece following up on the Car Wars study from John Murphy, and I said basically, we're seeing historic levels of change within the business. Think about that. Everything, design, engineering, sourcing, location, manufacturing, marketing, nothing, absolutely nothing is being done the same way or won't be done the same way as before. Even retail, how much of the business now is done at least some degree online, and you're starting to see manufacturers like Tesla and Lucid and Rivian that are doing a significant portion of their sales online. Now you add the coming of autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, and hey, even some flying vehicles. It's the industry in 10 years will look hugely different from what it is today. And frankly, it's getting there with more change every year.
Interesting. All right. And so, folks, if they want to get clued into your writing, where do they go?
Well, probably the easiest place is to go to headlight.news. Headlight just on a car, but singular, headlight.news.